She walks through the hospital hallway in a housekeeping uniform while he stands in an expensive suit, desperate and broken. He has everything money can buy, but nothing money can save. She has nothing but the one thing his daughter needs. When she reveals what the doctors missed, his entire world changes. But keeping her in his life will cost him more than he ever imagined. Before we dive in, comment below where in the world you are watching from. And don't forget to click subscribe. The hospital room was silent except for the steady beep of the ventilator and the hum of machines that had become the soundtrack of Marcus Webb's life over the past 3 weeks. His daughter Emma lay in the bed, her small body barely making an impression under the white cotton sheets. She was 7 years old. The doctors had given him less than 24 hours before they would recommend turning off the life support. Marcus stood by the window, looking out at the gray sky, his reflection ghostly in the glass. He was one of the wealthiest men in America. His tech company had transformed an entire industry. He had weathered hostile takeovers, market crashes, and political opposition. But none of that mattered now. None of his power, none of his money, none of his connections could fix what was happening to his only child. Emma had contracted a rare infection, something the doctors still couldn't fully identify. It had started as a simple fever 2 weeks ago, just after Marcus's wife, Sarah, had taken her to school. By the time Marcus arrived home from his office in Manhattan, Emma was already hallucinating, her small body burning with a temperature that wouldn't break. He had called the ambulance himself, holding her hand as they rushed through the city streets. The emergency room doctors had run every test: blood work, imaging, cultures. Everything came back inconclusive. The infection was aggressive, unlike anything they had seen before. It attacked her lungs first, then her heart, then her brain. Within days, she couldn't breathe on her own. They intubated her, put her on a ventilator, filled her body with antibiotics that didn't seem to work. The ICU became her prison. Machines became her lifeline. And Marcus became a man frozen in time, watching his daughter slip away while he stood powerless. Sarah had been here constantly for the first week, sleeping in the chair beside Emma's bed, talking to her even though Emma couldn't hear. But Sarah had broken. On day 10, she had stopped coming. She had told Marcus she couldn't watch this anymore, that she needed to take their younger son Michael to his grandmother's house for a while. Marcus understood. He had nodded. He had told her to go. But inside, he felt abandoned, like the one person who shared his love for this child had given up. Marcus hadn't given up. He still came to the hospital every day, every hour he could find. He held Emma's hand even though she didn't squeeze back. He talked to her about her favorite things, about the birthday party they were supposed to have, about the new ballet lessons she had been excited to start. He told her about the ocean and sunny days, and all the things they would do together when she got better. The doctors had stopped saying when. They started saying if. And then yesterday, the head of the ICU, Dr. Patricia Chen, had pulled him into a small room off the hallway. Her face had been grave, her words measured, but final. "We've done everything we can," she had said. "Emma's organs are failing. The infection has damaged them beyond what we can repair. At this point, the machines are only prolonging the inevitable. I recommend we discuss comfort care, turning off the ventilator, letting her go." Marcus had felt the world tilt. Letting her go. As if Emma was a balloon floating away. As if death was something natural, something he should simply accept. He had asked for 24 hours. Just one more day. The doctor had nodded, compassionate but firm. One more day. After that, they would need to make a decision. Marcus had spent the entire night in that chair beside Emma's bed, watching her chest rise and fall with each mechanical breath. He had prayed, though he hadn't prayed in years. He had cried. He had raged silently at the unfairness of it all. And he had made a decision. He would fight. Even if the doctors had given up, even if the odds were impossible, he would find another way. He had already called specialists in Boston, in California, in Switzerland. He had offered money, enormous sums, but every expert said the same thing. Without knowing what the infection was, they couldn't treat it, and Emma's body was too weak now to survive many more interventions. By dawn, Marcus felt hollowed out. He looked at his watch. It was 6 in the morning. In 18 hours, he would have to make a choice. Let his daughter die. The thought was unbearable. He sat in the hallway outside Emma's room, his head in his hands, not noticing when a woman with a cleaning cart wheeled past him. Alicia Matthews had been working at the hospital for 3 years. She had started as a volunteer while finishing her nursing degree, then stayed on as part of the housekeeping staff to pay the bills. She was 34 years old, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had lived much longer. She had grown up in poverty, raised by a grandmother who worked 3 jobs. She had fought her way through school, watching friends fall into addiction, crime, despair. She had escaped through sheer will and the love of a man named David. David had been her high school sweetheart. They had married young, had a son named James, and built a life together despite having almost nothing. Then David had gotten sick, pancreatic cancer. He had died when James was only 5 years old. The medical bills had been staggering. The grief had been worse. Alicia had gone back to school anyway, determined to become a nurse so she could help people like her husband, so she could make a difference. But nursing school was expensive, and time was short. James needed her. So she worked as a housekeeper at the hospital while taking night classes, barely sleeping, running on coffee and determination. 3 years in, she was almost done. Just another semester, and she would graduate. Then everything would change. Then she could give James the life he deserved. This morning, Alicia was assigned to the pediatric intensive care unit for the first time in months. Usually she worked the regular floors, but someone had called in sick and they needed the help. She pushed her cart slowly, careful not to make noise. In the ICU, sleep mattered. She had learned that early on. As she passed the hallway outside one of the rooms, she noticed a man sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, his face in his hands. He wore an expensive suit, even at 6 in the morning. His shoes were polished leather, but his face told a different story. It was a face of someone whose money couldn't buy what he needed most. Alicia recognized that look. She had seen it in the mirror after David died. She continued pushing her cart into the empty hallway, but something made her pause. She looked back at the man. Then she looked at the room he was sitting outside of. Through the partially open door, she could see a small figure in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines. A child. Her heart clenched. She had seen too much loss in this place. She had learned to protect herself, to stay professional, to not get too attached. But children were different. Children shouldn't suffer. They shouldn't die. She made a decision. She left her cart in the hallway and quietly entered the room. The man didn't follow. He was still sitting outside, lost in his own world. Inside, Alicia approached the bed slowly. The girl had blonde hair, fine and thin, spread across the pillow. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. She was hooked to a ventilator, an IV in her arm, monitors tracking every heartbeat. Alicia had seen this configuration before. This was a child running out of time. She looked at the chart clipped to the end of the bed. Emma Webb, age 7, diagnosis still pending, infected with unknown pathogen, organ failure progressing, comfort care recommended. Alicia's hands trembled slightly as she read the notes. No diagnosis. They didn't even know what was killing her. She looked back at Emma's face, at the child's closed eyes, at her small hands resting on top of the blanket. Alicia reached out and gently touched the girl's forehead. It was cool now, thanks to the fever reducers, but Alicia could feel something else underneath the coolness. Tension, fear embedded in the skin. She'd always believed there was something beyond the body, something that remained even when consciousness was gone. A spirit, a presence. Alicia leaned down close to Emma's ear and whispered softly, "You're going to be okay, sweetheart. I'm going to help you." She didn't know why she said it. She had no power to help, but she said it anyway. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. On the small table beside Emma's bed, there was a chart with Emma's vitals recorded. Temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. But there was something else too. A pattern. Alicia stared at it. Emma's fever was rising and falling in a very specific rhythm. Up by 2 degrees every 4 hours, then dropping by 1 degree, then climbing again. It wasn't random. It wasn't a normal infection pattern. The fluctuation was almost mechanical. Alicia had been studying medicine long enough to recognize that fever patterns could indicate different things. Bacterial infections usually climbed steadily. Viral infections sometimes spiked and dropped. But this pattern was unusual. It was almost like something was triggering the fever at specific intervals. She photographed the chart with her phone, then left the room. Outside in the hallway, the man was still sitting in the same position. She almost kept walking. She should have kept walking. But something made her stop. She knelt down slightly and looked at his face. "Are you her father?" she asked quietly. The man looked up, surprised to see her. He was probably used to people treating him with formality, respect. Here he was, just a grieving father. "Yes," he said. His voice was hoarse from crying or not speaking. "I'm her father." Alicia sat down on the floor beside him, a violation of every professional code she knew. "She's not ready to go," Alicia said. "Alicia." Marcus looked at her, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm sorry. Your daughter. She's fighting. I can see it. Her body is still fighting." Marcus felt something inside him break open again. He wanted to believe her, but he couldn't afford to hope. Hope was dangerous at this point. "The doctors say there's nothing they can do. They don't even know what's wrong with her." Alicia nodded slowly. "I noticed something. Her fever pattern. It's not random, it's rhythmic. I've been studying enough medicine to know that's unusual. I think there's something specific causing this, something the doctors might be missing." Marcus turned to look at her fully for the first time. This woman was wearing a hospital housekeeping uniform. She had no credentials visible. She could be anyone. But the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice made him listen. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. Alicia hesitated. She was stepping way out of line here. If anyone found out she was giving medical opinions, she could lose her job. She could be sued. But she thought about Emma's small face, about the girl still fighting even as her body failed. She thought about David, about all the people she hadn't been able to save. Maybe this one time, she could make a difference. "I think the fever pattern suggests a specific infection," Alicia said carefully. "Not a virus, not a typical bacterial infection. Maybe something parasitic, or maybe something environmental. I think the doctor should look deeper, test for more specific things. I think there's still time to find out what it is." Marcus felt a spark of something ignite in his chest. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. But hope nonetheless. He looked at this woman, this stranger who worked in housekeeping, who had taken time to look carefully at his daughter, and he said, "What's your name?" "Alicia," she said. "Alicia Matthews." Marcus extended his hand. "Marcus Webb, and I'm going to make sure the doctors listen to what you just told me." That afternoon, Dr. Patricia Chen stood in Marcus's private office with the expression of polite skepticism. Marcus had brought Alicia with him, the housekeeper's presence clearly uncomfortable for the hospital's hierarchy. He had shown the doctor the fever chart analysis that Alicia had marked up, highlighting the rhythmic pattern. "The pattern is interesting," Dr. Chen admitted, "but fever fluctuations can happen for many reasons. We've run cultures, blood tests, imaging. Everything is inconclusive. Running more tests would only stress Emma's body further." Marcus felt his frustration rising. "This woman noticed something none of your specialists noticed. She's suggesting a parasitic infection or environmental exposure. Shouldn't we at least test for those possibilities?" Dr. Chen sighed. She had seen this before. Desperate parents grasping at straws. "Mr. Webb, I understand this is difficult, and this. But sometimes the kindest thing we can do is—" "Test her," Marcus interrupted. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm requesting a full parasitic panel, environmental exposure screening. Whatever tests exist for infections you haven't ruled out yet. I'm paying for it. Just run them." Dr. Chen looked at Alicia, then back at Marcus. She was about to refuse, but something in his face stopped her. She had seen that look before, too. The look of someone with nothing to lose. "Fine," she said quietly. "We can run additional tests. But Mr. Webb, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that they won't find anything. And even if they do, her body may be too compromised to respond to treatment." Marcus nodded, but he wasn't listening anymore. He was thinking about Emma, about the small chance that this woman, this stranger, had given them. That night, the hospital moved quickly when money was involved. A specialized parasitology lab was contacted. Additional blood cultures were ordered. Tissue samples were collected. The ICU nurse who had been skeptical about the additional testing worked efficiently anyway, because that's what nurses do. They implement the orders of doctors. Even when they're skeptical, Alicia wasn't supposed to be in the hospital after her shift ended, but she found herself unable to leave. She sat in the waiting area near the ICU, her phone in her hand, pretending to work on her nursing school assignments. James was with her grandmother tonight. Alicia had called to say she had to work late. She had told her grandmother she might be studying late at the hospital library. None of that was technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The whole truth was that Alicia couldn't leave. Something inside her had awakened with Emma's case, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. She was supposed to be a scientist about this, clinical and professional. But she was a mother first. She understood what it meant to love a child so much that losing them would break you completely. She had nearly broken when David died. She had completely broken when the court had given her limited custody of James because she couldn't afford childcare while working full-time. The system had been cruel to her. But she had survived. She had fought. And maybe, just maybe, she could help this child fight too. Around 11 that night, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. They found something. The parasitic panel came back positive. Emma has a parasitic infection. It's rare, doesn't match the typical presentation, which is why it was missed initially. The doctors are reviewing treatment options now. Alicia's hands started shaking. She had been right. The pattern had meant something. And if they had caught it, if they could treat it, Emma might have a chance. She texted back immediately. "What infection?" Marcus's response came quickly. "Something called Toxoplasma gondii. It's usually benign, but in rare cases, especially in young children with certain immune vulnerabilities, it can cause severe infection. The doctors are starting treatment tonight." He hesitated, then added another message. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened without you." Alicia read the messages twice, then set her phone down. She had done something good. In a world that had taken so much from her, she had managed to give something. She had fought the system and won. That feeling was enough to sustain her through the night. She drove home just before dawn, exhausted, but alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. 3 days later, Emma's fever began to drop. Not in that rhythmic pattern that had first alerted Alicia. It dropped steadily, persistently, as the anti-parasitic medication flooded her small system. Her oxygen saturation improved. Her heart rate stabilized. The doctors began talking about extubation. The breathing tube that had been her prison might soon be removed. Marcus barely left the hospital. He brought clothes, toiletries, and set up a semi-permanent camp in a nearby hotel. Sarah came back when the news turned positive. She walked into Emma's room with flowers and tears streaming down her face. "She's going to make it," Marcus told her. "A woman who works here, she noticed something. She saved Emma's life." Sarah embraced him, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus felt like maybe the world wasn't completely cruel. Alicia finished her shift the day Emma was extubated. She stood at the window of the observation area above the ICU, watching as Dr. Chen carefully removed the breathing tube. Emma's small chest heaved as she took her first unassisted breath in nearly a month. Her eyes fluttered open. Her mouth moved. "Mama," she whispered. It was barely audible, but it was enough. In the room, Marcus heard that single word, and something inside him shifted. His daughter was alive. His daughter was speaking. His daughter was back. He looked up toward the observation window. Alicia was standing there, watching, Their eyes met across the distance, and Marcus mouthed the words, "Thank you." Alicia nodded, then turned to leave. She was exhausted. She had done what she came to do. But as she walked toward the stairs, Marcus called her name. He had left Emma with Sarah and run out into the hallway. "Alicia, wait." She stopped and turned. Marcus looked like a different man than the one she had found sitting on the floor 4 days ago. There was light in his eyes again. "What you did for Emma, I can't repay that. But I want to try. I want to help you. Your nursing school, your application, whatever you need." Alicia felt something inside her resist. She didn't want to be someone's charity case. She had built her life on her own terms. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm finishing school on my own timeline." "I know you are," Marcus said. "That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting a partnership. Emma needs ongoing care, specialized follow-up. I need someone I trust to help coordinate that care. I need someone who saw what others missed. I need you." Alicia looked at him for a long moment. She was tired of fighting alone, tired of barely surviving. And here was someone offering her a way to do what she loved while taking care of her own family. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Marcus nodded. "Take your time. But I hope you'll say yes. For Emma, for yourself, for whatever comes next." Over the next 2 weeks, as Emma recovered in the hospital, Alicia found herself drawn back again and again. She would finish her housekeeping shift and find excuses to check on Emma. She would bring the girl books to read when she was strong enough to hold them. She would sit with her and talk about ordinary things, school and friends and dreams, the things children talk about when they're not fighting for their lives. Emma called her Miss Alicia at first, because that was proper, but children have a way of erasing formality with their genuine affection. Within days, Emma was calling her Miss Alicia only when other people were around. When it was just them, she was Alicia. Or sometimes, when Emma was tired or scared, she was just Alicia, short and warm and full of connection. Marcus watched this relationship develop with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something he was afraid to name. His wife Sarah was distant now in a way that hadn't existed before the crisis. She was present, supportive, but disconnected. The near loss of Emma had broken something between them that hadn't been fully working for a long time. But Alicia's presence in their lives felt like healing. Not romantic, not yet. Not in any way Marcus would allow himself to think about while his marriage still technically existed. But healing nonetheless. A woman who understood loss, who had fought against impossible odds, who had seen his daughter not as a problem to solve, but as a person to save. When Emma was finally released from the hospital, it was with strict follow-up care requirements. She needed ongoing medication for another 8 weeks. She needed careful monitoring of her diet and activity. She needed someone to coordinate with her pediatrician and the infectious disease specialist. Marcus had already settled the matter, at least in his mind. He had offered Alicia the position of personal medical coordinator for Emma, a substantial salary, and full tuition for the remainder of her nursing degree. Alicia had resisted at first, but Emma had done what a 7-year-old does best. She had asked for Alicia directly. Emma had looked up at her mother with those eyes that had looked at death and still managed to believe in tomorrow. "I want Alicia to take care of me," she had said simply. "I trust her." What parent could say no to that? Alicia had accepted the position with conditions of her own. She would still finish her nursing degree. She would live in the guest house on the Webb family property, maintaining professional boundaries. She would be a medical coordinator and caregiver, not a member of the family. Marcus had agreed to all of it, even though they both knew the boundaries would blur with time. That's what happens when you survive a crisis together. The walls that separate people become transparent. Alicia's first morning in the guest house. She woke early and sat on the small porch with a cup of coffee. She could see the main house in the distance, could see the morning light hitting the windows. She could see a figure moving inside. Marcus, probably. Checking on Emma, making sure his daughter was still breathing, still alive, still here. She understood that impulse. She had felt it every morning after David died. the need to verify that the person you loved was still in the world. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "Grandma says I can come visit you this weekend. Can I see the big house?" Alicia smiled. This was what she had fought for. A chance to give her son a better life. A chance to be present for the people she loved. A chance to matter. She texted back. "You can see it all, baby. There's so much I want to show you." She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know how long she would work for Marcus, how long this arrangement would last, or what it would become. But for the first time in a long time, Alicia wasn't afraid of not knowing. She was just grateful to be alive, to be present, to have made a difference when it mattered most. The first week at the Webb estate was a blur of routine and discovery. Alicia learned Emma's medication schedule, the exact times her fevers would need monitoring, the foods that helped her strength return without upsetting her recovering digestive system. She kept detailed notes, tracked everything in a leather journal Marcus had given her, documented every improvement. It was what she did. She took chaos and turned it into order. The guest house was beautiful, in a way that made Alicia slightly uncomfortable. Everything was new. Everything was clean. Everything was exactly what someone might need if they didn't know who that someone was. She had furnished it herself, bringing in things from her grandmother's house, hanging pictures of James on the walls, creating spaces that felt lived in rather than staged. By the second week, Emma was strong enough to walk without assistance. Her appetite had returned almost completely. The medications were working exactly as the infectious disease specialist had predicted. The parasite was dying. Emma was living. Marcus had hired a private tutor so Emma could catch up on the schoolwork she had missed during her hospitalization. The tutor came 3 afternoons a week, setting up in the bright sitting room near the library. Alicia would bring them tea and watch from a distance as Emma slowly regained her confidence, her curiosity, her childhood. One afternoon, Emma asked to take a walk through the property. It was a sprawling estate, 15 acres of manicured gardens, a small pond, walking trails through cultivated woods. Alicia walked beside her, letting Emma set the pace, watching carefully for any sign of exhaustion. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Then Emma asked a question that Alicia wasn't prepared for. "Why do you take care of me?" It was innocent the way children ask questions, without agenda or judgment, just genuine curiosity. Alicia took a breath before answering. "Because you needed someone to," she said finally. "And because I believe in you." Emma nodded, accepting this answer in the way children do, as simply stated fact rather than something requiring deeper explanation. "My mommy doesn't come to the guest house," Emma observed. It was true. Sarah had visited Emma a few times in the first week, but she had kept her distance from Alicia. There was something in her expression whenever she saw them together, a tightness in her jaw, a coldness in her eyes. Alicia recognized it. She had seen it before in women who felt threatened by another woman's presence in their family's space. "Your mommy loves you very much," Alicia said carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups are complicated. They have feelings that are hard to understand." Emma considered this. Like when Daddy doesn't smile the same way anymore. Alicia felt her heart squeeze. Children saw everything. They understood more than adults gave them credit for. The dissolution of Marcus and Sarah's marriage was happening in real time, visible to anyone paying attention. They slept in separate rooms now. Their conversations were polite and hollow. They moved around each other like people trying not to take up too much space. "Your parents love you," Alicia said, choosing her words carefully. "That's the most important thing. Even when adults are figuring out their own feelings." They continued walking, and Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. But as they walked, Alicia felt the weight of something shifting. She was being drawn deeper into this family in ways that went beyond medical coordination. She was becoming a confidant, a presence, something more than an employee. That evening, Marcus found her in the kitchen preparing Emma's evening medications. His daughter was upstairs finishing her homework. Sarah was in the city for the night. Something about a gallery opening she had committed to weeks ago. It was just the 3 of them in the house. "Thank you for today," Marcus said. "Emma told me you went for a long walk." She seemed happy. "She's recovering beautifully," Alicia replied, measuring out the exact dosage, keeping her tone professional. "Another 2 weeks and we can probably reduce the medication schedule." "That's not what I meant," Marcus said. He was standing close now, close enough that Alicia could feel the energy of him, the weight of his attention. "I meant thank you for being here. For Emma. For all of this." Alicia carefully placed the medication cup on the counter. She didn't turn around immediately. She took a breath. When she did turn, Marcus was looking at her with an expression that made her throat tight. This was dangerous. She could see it clearly. This was a man whose world had been shaken, who had found solace in her presence, who was probably confusing gratitude with something else. And she was vulnerable too. She was a woman who had been alone for a long time, who was afraid of staying alone forever, who could easily fall into the fantasy of being needed, being valued, being loved. "I need to set a boundary," Alicia said quietly. "Emma's medication is ready. I'm going to go back to the guest house for the evening. Call if you need anything." She didn't wait for him to respond. She left the kitchen, picked up her bag, and walked out into the cooling evening air. Behind her, she could feel Marcus watching, but she didn't turn around. That night, lying in her small bed in the guest house, Alicia texted her grandmother, "Can you keep James an extra week? I need to think about some things." Her grandmother's response came quickly. "Everything okay?" Alicia stared at the question. Was everything okay? Her daughter was alive. She had a job that paid better than she had ever imagined. She was 1 semester away from finishing her nursing degree. She had stepped into a family's life and changed the trajectory of their story. But she was also falling into something she couldn't afford to fall into. She was becoming emotionally entangled with people whose lives were fundamentally different from hers. People who had money to solve problems, connections to navigate systems, power to reshape outcomes. And when this arrangement ended, when the crisis had fully passed and Alicia was no longer needed, she would be the one left behind. Better to establish boundaries now. Better to protect her heart while she still could. She texted back, "Just working through some stuff. Love you." Emma was confused when Alicia became more distant in the following days. She maintained the same level of professional care, tracked the medications as carefully as ever, monitored her recovery with the same attention to detail. But she stopped taking walks with her. She stopped sitting with her during homework time. She kept interactions brief and bounded by professional necessity. Emma mentioned it to her father. "Alicia doesn't want to play with me anymore," she said, her voice small. Marcus felt the distance too. He saw it in the way Alicia's eyes didn't quite meet his anymore, in the way she always found a reason to leave a room when he entered it, in the careful professionalism that had replaced the warmth from before. He understood what had happened. He had crossed a line. He had let his loneliness and gratitude blur into something else, something that made her uncomfortable. He needed to fix this, but he didn't know how. By the end of the second week, tension had filled the estate like a physical thing. Emma was fully recovered medically, but emotionally confused by Alicia's withdrawal. Sarah was asking questions about Alicia's reduced presence in the house, with an edge to her voice that suggested she knew exactly what had almost happened and was relieved it hadn't. And Marcus was sitting in his office late at night, staring at his phone, wanting to call Alicia, but knowing he had no right to. The third week of Alicia's employment at the Webb estate began with a phone call. It was Dr. Chen from the hospital. Emma's follow-up blood work had come back clear. The parasitic infection was completely eradicated. There was no medical reason for Alicia to continue monitoring her medication anymore. The regular pediatrician could handle the routine follow-ups. Alicia felt her stomach drop when she heard the words. This was what she had been working toward. This was the goal. Emma was healthy. Emma was safe. But it also meant her job here was ending. She thanked Dr. Chen, asked for the full report to be sent to her email, and hung up the phone. She stood in the small kitchen of the guest house, holding the phone to her chest, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her. She had been so focused on protecting herself from emotional involvement that she hadn't prepared for this moment. the moment when she would have to leave. Alicia spent the rest of the day gathering her things. She had accumulated more than she realized in just 3 weeks. Clothes she had unpacked and settled into drawers. Books she had left on the small shelf. Pictures of James and her grandmother that she had arranged on the nightstand. She packed slowly, deliberately, trying not to think about Emma, trying not to picture Marcus's face when she told him she was leaving. That evening, she requested a meeting with Marcus. They met in his study, a room that felt cold and formal after the warmth of the rest of the house. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept well in days. There were dark circles under his eyes and a new thinness to his face. Dr. Chen called, Alicia said without preamble. Emma's infection is gone. She's completely clear. She doesn't need ongoing medical coordination anymore. Marcus felt something inside him shatter. He had known this day would come, but somehow he hadn't believed it. Somehow he had thought there would be more time. When are you leaving? He asked quietly. Tomorrow morning, Alicia said. I'll help with the transition. I can leave detailed notes about her medications, her routine, anything the pediatrician needs to know. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Outside, it was dark. Inside, the room felt too small. I don't want you to go, he said. The words came out quietly, honestly, like something he couldn't hold in anymore. Alicia felt her walls shake. This was exactly what she had been trying to prevent. This moment where the professional boundary dissolved completely. You don't want me to go because you're grateful, she said carefully. Because I saved Emma's life. But that's not the same as wanting me. And I can't stay based on something that isn't real. How do you know it's not real? Marcus turned to face her. How do you know what I feel? Because I know how this works, Alicia said, her voice steady even though her hands were trembling. I've seen it 100 times. A man's life falls apart. A woman comes in and helps him put it back together, and he confuses gratitude with love. Then the crisis passes and everyone moves on. Is that what you think is happening? Marcus asked. That I'm confusing gratitude with love. I think you're a good man, who's going through a difficult time, Alicia said. And I think I should leave before either of us gets hurt. She stood and walked toward the door. Marcus didn't try to stop her. He couldn't. He wasn't entirely sure she was wrong. That night, Emma came to Alicia's room in the guest house. The child had followed her there after dinner when Alicia had excused herself. She stood in the doorway, looking at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. You're leaving, Emma said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Alicia said. I am. Emma's face crumpled. Why? Did I do something wrong? Alicia's heart broke into pieces. She sat down on the bed and pulled Emma close. You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. You're perfect. You're healthy and strong and perfect. And I have to go because that was my job, to make sure you got better. And you did. I don't want you to go, Emma whispered. I love you. The words, so simple and so devastating, nearly broke Alicia completely. She held the child tighter, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, memorizing the exact weight of her in her arms. I love you too, she said. I love you so much. But sometimes people come into our lives for a reason, and then they have to go. That doesn't mean the love goes away. It's not fair, Emma said, and her tears started flowing. Alicia held her while she cried, held her while her small body shook with the kind of grief that children experience so deeply and so completely. When Emma finally fell asleep against Alicia's chest, Alicia carried her back to her room and tucked her into bed. She stood there for a long time, watching the child sleep, knowing this might be the last time she saw her. The next morning, Alicia loaded her car before sunrise. She didn't say goodbye to Marcus. She left a folder on the kitchen counter with all her notes, medication schedules, emergency contact information, everything Emma's regular pediatrician would need to know. She drove away from the estate as the sky was turning pink with dawn, tears streaming down her face. She had done the right thing. She had protected her heart. She had maintained professional boundaries. And it felt like the worst decision she had ever made. Back at the estate, Emma woke up looking for Alicia. When she couldn't find her, she went to Marcus. "Where's Alicia?" she asked, her voice small and scared. Marcus didn't know how to answer. He had let her go because she was right. She was right that he was vulnerable, that his feelings might be confused. She was right that boundaries mattered. But she was also wrong about one thing. She was wrong about him not loving her. He did. He had fallen in love with her somewhere between the fever charts and the late-night conversations. He had fallen in love with her strength, her dedication, her ability to see his daughter not as a problem to solve but as a person to save. And he had been too cowardly to fight for it. That afternoon, Marcus closed his office. He told his assistant he was taking a personal leave. He didn't go to the city. He went to the library instead, to the records office, to every place he could think of where information about Alicia Matthews might be kept. He had her address from her employment file. He had her phone number. But he needed to understand her first. He needed to understand what had made her so protective of her heart, what had shaped her into the woman she had become. It took hours of research, but gradually the pieces came together. Alicia's file from the hospital showed she was a nursing student. Her address led him to a modest neighborhood in Queens. Her phone number was in a database that connected to her previous employment at a pediatric clinic 5 years ago. He dug deeper and found the story: a lawsuit, a mother claiming negligence. Alicia had allegedly failed to monitor a child properly, had stepped out of her role as nurse to provide emotional support instead of clinical care. The child had had a medical crisis while Alicia was comforting the mother rather than checking vitals. The family had sued. Alicia had lost her job. The case had been settled with a non-disclosure agreement. Most of the details were sealed. But the damage was clear. Alicia had trusted herself to help a family, and she had been blamed when things went wrong. That was why she protected her boundaries so fiercely. That was why she wouldn't let herself get close to people. Because the last time she had, the system had turned on her. Marcus sat in his study that night, understanding finally why Alicia had left. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much and couldn't afford to care. The next morning, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let her disappear. He wasn't going to accept her boundaries as final. But he was also not going to push. Instead, he was going to do what she had done for Emma. He was going to observe. He was going to be patient. He was going to show up consistently and let her see who he really was. Not a grateful employer, not a desperate man, but simply someone who loved her. He showed up at the hospital where Alicia worked as a housekeeper. He found her pushing her cleaning cart through the pediatric ICU, and he asked to speak with her. Alicia's first instinct was to refuse. But something in his face stopped her. They sat in the hospital cafeteria at a small table away from other people. "I did research," Marcus said without preamble. "I found the lawsuit. I found out what happened at the clinic. I understand now why you built such strong walls." Alicia felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. "That's private information. How did you—" "I'm sorry for violating your privacy," Marcus interrupted. "But I needed to understand. And I need you to understand something too. That case wasn't your fault. You were a good nurse. You were a good person. You were trying to help and the system blamed you for it." "You don't know anything about it," Alicia said coldly. "You're right," Marcus agreed. "I don't. But I know this. Every day since you left, Emma asks for you. Every morning she wakes up hoping maybe you'll come back. And I wake up wondering if I'm going to spend the rest of my life regretting that I let you go." Alicia stood to leave. "This isn't fair. You can't come here and try to manipulate me into coming back. That's not how—" "I'm not asking you to come back," Marcus said. "I'm asking you to let me in. I'm asking you to tell me what you need, what would make you feel safe. I'm asking you to trust that I'm not the system that hurt you. I'm asking you to let me love you." The cafeteria seemed to tilt around Alicia. She had spent so long building walls that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone try to reach over them. "I can't," she whispered. "I have James. I have my nursing degree. I have a life I've built on my own. I can't risk it." "I'm not asking you to risk anything," Marcus said. "I'm asking you to share it. With me." With Emma. Let me help with James's education. Let me help you finish your nursing degree. Let me be part of your life, not as an employer, but as someone who loves you. Alicia left the cafeteria without responding, but Marcus's words followed her through the day. They haunted her through the evening. They invaded her dreams that night. By the next morning, she had made a decision. She was going to finish her nursing degree. She was going to stop running from love. But first, she had to understand what she really wanted. She called her grandmother and asked if James could spend the weekend with her. Then she took time off from her jobs and drove to a small town in Vermont, to a cabin she had rented for herself. She spent the weekend alone with her thoughts, with her fears, with her hopes. She thought about David, about the love she had lost, about how the fear of loss had nearly made her lose the chance at finding love again. She thought about Emma, about a child who needed her not out of obligation, but out of genuine connection. She thought about Marcus, about a man who had shown up in the hospital cafeteria willing to be vulnerable, willing to fight for her. And she thought about herself, about Alicia Matthews, and who she wanted to become. By Sunday evening, she knew what she had to do. She returned to the city, picked up James from her grandmother's house, and drove to the Webb estate. Marcus answered the door himself. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Alicia spoke. "I'm not coming back as an employee," she said. "I'm coming back as someone who wants to build a life with you. With you and Emma. With all of it. The complicated parts and the beautiful parts. But we're going to do this slowly. We're going to let Emma adjust. We're going to let this be real, not some fantasy born from crisis. And I'm going to finish my nursing degree. I'm going to become the kind of nurse who can help families without losing herself. Can you accept that?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yes," he said. "I can accept that. I will accept that. I accept everything." He looked at James, standing slightly behind his mother, watching carefully to see if this man could be trusted. Marcus bent down to the boy's level. "Hi, James. I'm Marcus. Your mom is one of the most extraordinary people I know, and I'm hoping you'll let me get to know you too." James looked at his mother. Alicia nodded. The boy extended his hand, small and cautious. Marcus shook it solemnly, understanding that he was being accepted into their family on probation, that he would have to earn their trust every single day. Emma heard voices and came running downstairs. When she saw Alicia, she froze. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she ran, her small body crashing into Alicia's arms, and she cried and laughed at the same time. "You came back," she sobbed. "You said you loved me and you came back." "I did," Alicia said, holding her tight. "I'm going to stay. I'm going to be here." Over the next 6 months, the arrangement took shape. Alicia and James moved into the guest house, but gradually the boundaries between the guest house and the main house dissolved. James started school at an elite private academy that Marcus had attended as a child. Alicia finished her final semester of nursing school while working part-time at the hospital. Marcus took a step back from his company, promoting executives who were actually more capable than he was and whose lives weren't falling apart. Sarah moved out and filed for divorce. It was amicable, civil. She understood that Marcus had changed in a fundamental way, that he had found something real with Alicia, and that fighting it would only hurt everyone, especially Emma. The divorce proceedings took 4 months. During that time, Sarah occasionally visited Emma. She was cordial to Alicia. She even admitted once that she was glad Emma had someone who cared so deeply about her. By the time the divorce was final, something had shifted in the household. It no longer felt like they were trying to fit into someone else's mold. It felt like home. On a Saturday in early December, Alicia graduated from nursing school. Her class ceremony was held in a large auditorium at the university. James sat between Marcus and Emma, watching his mother walk across the stage to receive her diploma. When Alicia's name was called, both children cheered loudly enough to earn them a gentle shush from the woman sitting next to them. Marcus watched Alicia with his hand on his heart. She had done it. She had fought through grief, through fear, through a system that had tried to break her. And she had come out the other side whole. That evening, they celebrated at a small restaurant in the city. Alicia's grandmother was there, beaming with pride. Her closest friend from nursing school attended. The table was full of people who loved her, who had watched her struggle, who had believed she could make it. Toward the end of the meal, Marcus stood and raised his glass. "I want to toast Alicia," he said. Everyone quieted and turned to look at her. When we met, she was pushing a cleaning cart through a hospital hallway. Most people wouldn't have noticed her. Most people see housekeeping staff and move right past them. But Alicia saw my daughter. Really saw her. She paid attention when no one else did. She asked questions when others accepted easy answers. And she saved my daughter's life. He paused, looking directly at Alicia. But more than that, she changed all of our lives. She showed us what it means to really see people, to really care, to really fight for the people you love, even when it's terrifying. He turned to James and Emma, who were sitting on either side of Alicia. My family is complete because of her. My heart is full because of her, and I hope I get to spend the rest of my life showing her how much that matters. He raised his glass higher. To Alicia Matthews. Nurse, mother, the love of my life. Everyone drank and cheered. Alicia's eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. Emma leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. James squeezed her hand under the table. Her grandmother reached across and squeezed her other hand. She was surrounded by love, real love, earned love, the kind that comes from showing up and being present and choosing each other every single day. 3 months later, on a beautiful spring afternoon, Marcus and Alicia were married. It wasn't a large wedding. They didn't need a show of wealth or status. Instead, they had a small ceremony in the gardens of the estate, with close friends and family gathered around them. Emma was Alicia's maid of honor, wearing a pale pink dress and carrying a basket of rose petals with such seriousness that several guests cried just watching her. James walked his mother down the aisle, his face solemn and proud. He had grown close to Marcus over the past months, learning to trust him with his mother's heart. Alicia wore a simple white dress. She had designed it herself, with help from a fashion student friend. It wasn't expensive or elaborate, but it was perfect because it was hers. Marcus waited for her at the altar, barely breathing until she reached him. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Emma raised her hand slightly, and everyone laughed. The officiant asked what her objection was. "I just want to make sure," Emma said seriously, "that you promise to always love my mommy and take care of her." Marcus got down on one knee in front of the child. "I promise," he said solemnly, "with all my heart." Emma nodded, satisfied, and Marcus rose to take Alicia's hand. They exchanged vows that they had written themselves. Alicia spoke about finding home not in a place, but in a person. Marcus spoke about learning that the greatest wealth wasn't money, but the people you chose to love. When they kissed, their children cheered louder than anyone else. The reception was held in a tent in the same garden. There was music and dancing and food and laughter. Alicia danced with her grandmother first, thanking her for all the sacrifices she had made. James and Emma danced together, fighting in the silly way children do, making everyone smile. Marcus danced with both of his children, holding them close, thanking them for welcoming Alicia into their lives. And when the evening was winding down, Marcus took Alicia's hand and led her away from the tent, back into the gardens where the sun was setting over the landscape in shades of orange and pink. "I'm scared," Alicia said suddenly. Marcus stopped walking and looked at her. "Scared of what?" "That this won't last," she admitted. "That something will go wrong and I'll lose this. I'll lose you. I'll lose Emma. I'll lose everything again." Marcus pulled her close. "Listen to me," he said. "Life is scary. Love is terrifying. It's the most dangerous thing a person can do. But you know what's scarier? Living your whole life afraid of losing something that could be the most beautiful part of your existence. I'm not promising that nothing bad will ever happen. I'm promising that I will show up. Every single day. Through everything. I will choose you." Alicia cried against his chest, releasing years of held tension, years of protecting herself, years of being afraid. Marcus held her while she cried, saying nothing, just being present. because that was what love was. Not grand gestures, not perfect moments, just showing up and being present and choosing each other even when it was hard. By the time they returned to the reception, Alicia had composed herself. She smiled at her grandmother, waved at James and Emma, who were eating cake with their fingers and making a mess. She looked at the tent filled with people who cared about her, who had witnessed her journey. And she understood finally that she had been healed long before she met Marcus. She had healed herself by choosing to keep going, by believing in her own worth, by building a life based on her own terms. Marcus had just been there to remind her that she didn't have to do it alone. The next year was about building. Alicia obtained her nursing license and began working at a prestigious hospital in the pediatric ward. She specialized in treating children with rare infections, using her knowledge and her experience to help families navigate the same crisis she had experienced. Marcus stepped further back from his company and spent more time with his children. Emma thrived in school, her resilience and kindness impressing teachers and students alike. She had been through something terrifying, and had come out the other side with her ability to love intact. James flourished with stability and security for the first time in his young life. He made friends, participated in sports, slowly healed from the loss of his father. The family became whole in the way families should be. Not perfect, but real. They fought sometimes. There were difficult conversations about money and class and the different worlds Marcus and Alicia came from. Marcus sometimes fell back into old patterns of trying to solve problems with money instead of presence. Alicia sometimes protected her heart too fiercely, creating distance when she felt vulnerable. But they talked about it. They worked through it. They chose each other every single day. 2 years after Emma's illness, the Webb Family Medical Foundation was established. It was funded by Marcus's personal wealth, but run by Alicia and a team of dedicated medical professionals. The foundation focused on rare pediatric infections and the importance of careful observation and thorough testing. It funded research into misdiagnosed conditions. It provided free consultations for families facing medical crises. Most importantly, it honored the role of healthcare workers, who were often overlooked, but whose attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. Dr. Patricia Chen was on the board. So was the hospital administrator. But Alicia was the heart of it. She visited families going through what she had experienced. She listened to them. She believed them. She taught other healthcare workers to really see patients, not just as cases, but as people. The foundation became known for its compassion and its rigor, for its understanding that medicine was both science and art. One afternoon, about 3 years after Emma's initial illness, Alicia was in the foundation's office when a young woman came in. She was a housekeeper at a local hospital. She had noticed something odd in a patient's symptoms. The doctors had dismissed her observations. She didn't have credentials, so she had no authority. She didn't have a medical degree, so her opinion didn't matter. But she had noticed something, and it was bothering her. Alicia sat down with the young woman and listened to her carefully. She didn't dismiss her. She didn't minimize her observations. She called the hospital. She requested a meeting with the attending physician. She brought her own medical expertise to bear, and within a week, the young woman's observation had led to a new diagnosis that changed that patient's treatment course. When the foundation publicized the case, highlighting the young woman's role, something shifted in the hospital culture. Healthcare workers who weren't doctors started being taken seriously. Observations started being valued. People started really listening to each other. It was a small change, but it rippled outward. Alicia had created something that honored the person she had been when she was cleaning hospital hallways. She had created a system that said, "You matter. Your observations matter. Your care matters. Even if you're not the one with the credentials, your presence and attention can change lives." One evening, the entire family sat on the back porch of the house watching the sunset. Emma was doing homework on a laptop. James was reading a book. Marcus had his arm around Alicia. They weren't doing anything special. They were just being present together. Emma looked up from her homework. "Do you remember when you were in the hospital?" she asked Alicia. "Which time?" Alicia asked, knowing exactly which time. "When you came and saved me," Emma said. Alicia smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. I remember. I was scared, Emma said. I thought I was dying. You were very brave, Alicia said. You fought so hard. But you were there, Emma said. And then Daddy was there, and then James was there, and everything got better. Emma paused and added, I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people and save them. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. Alicia pulled Emma close. You're already doing that, she said. Just by being kind and paying attention. That's how we save people. We pay attention. We care. We show up. James looked up from his book. Are we getting cheesy? He asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. Yes, Alicia said. We're getting very cheesy. Good, James said. I like cheesy. Marcus laughed and reached over to ruffle his son's hair. The family sat together as the sun sank lower and the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began to appear. The evening air was cool and smelled like flowers. It was a moment of such perfect simplicity that Alicia almost couldn't breathe. This was what she had fought for. This was what she had built. Not a life free of struggle or pain, but a life full of people who loved each other, who showed up for each other, who saw each other clearly. As darkness fell completely and the stars emerged fully, Alicia thought back to that hospital room where Emma lay dying, where she had whispered into the child's ear that everything would be okay. She had had no power to make that true, but she had shown up. She had paid attention. She had cared. And somehow, in some way that she still didn't fully understand, that had been enough. It had been more than enough. It had been everything. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.